And we're back here on the Feature Presentation Podcast with my special guest this week, filmmaker Zach Thompson. Zach, how are you?
Doing great.
Fantastic. And I was loving the chat we were having before we started recording, because as I was telling you, I was reading your bio on IMDb, and I thought hearing your story from you directly would be a great inspiration for aspiring filmmakers like myself and others that might be listening to this podcast. So let's just dive right in. And what was it that initially made you want to get into the film industry?
So that's a great question. Of course, I grew up with my brothers, like just always our escape was to watch movies, to go to the movie theater, or to just sit down like at night and just binge on movies. Some of our favorite movies, like the original Batman and Ninja Turtles. And it was so fun. And it was such a fun escape that I wanted to be part of that storytelling. And there was my scoutmaster at the time. He actually said, "Hey, because I had a lot of energy back in middle school and high school." And he said, "Come out and work on these film sets with me." And he was actually one of the medics out on a lot of the sets. And so that's actually where I got to work on like Dumb and Dumber and Independence Day as a PA and extra. And from there, I just started making connections and had a great time telling the story, being a part of the storytelling, and started making more connections in the industry.
I love that you mentioned the original Ninja Turtles movie. That's actually the first movie I ever saw in theaters.
Oh, really?
Yep, I was 4 years old, and I think even back then, that's where I kind of fell in love with the storytelling of movies. Some love like the big action films, and I like those too. But even from an early age, I found myself loving getting lost in the story for 2 hours or however long the movie might be. It's a great escape, and yeah, I'm sure you agree with me. I think filmmaking to me is the greatest art form that's out there. No disrespect to any sculptors or painters, but crafting a movie, every movie is a miracle in a way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The funny thing is, as I talk to people about this, because it took me 10 years to figure out what I didn't want to do in the industry. So I tried all different aspects, and there are so many different facets to making a good movie, which again, sculptors and artists, and there's different things and way to convey the human experience in their story, but nothing like zooming in close on a tight shot and being able to have music and the ambiance, like all of those elements together make the movie industry like the best venue to convey stories. I agree with you.
Absolutely, because it takes so many different moving parts to make a movie happen. We all think of the Spielbergs and, the Tom Hankses of the world, and they're important, don't get me wrong, but it takes everyone working together, whether it's down to the PA all the way up to the director. They all have to work together to make the project happen, whether it's a small indie film or a big budget feature.
Oh, totally agreed. In fact, it's interesting. I'm always sharing this mathematical equation that doesn't quite work out. I say half of the movie is the lighting, half of the movie is the audio, half of the movie is the acting, half of the movie is the story. And I just keep going on like that on every different facet, the previs, and if you take away one of those, you literally lose half your movie. So like every aspect is so important. Now, mind you, people are forgiving of the quality of sound or lighting in different occasions if the story is just incredible. They're willing to forgive that, that lack of, but yeah, it's every aspect is important. In fact, my older brother, he and I are in the film industry, and he's actually one of the best previs artists he was actually previs soup on the movie Dune that just came out. In fact, it was fun.
Oh, awesome. Great movie.
Budapest a couple of years ago. Yeah. In fact, now he's going to be working on the subsequent films because he loves working with Denis Villeneuve, and Denis is such a great guy. But anyway, so it's fun because he and I had been going to the Comic-Cons for years. And so this is how we always were geeking out on all the stories that we grew up with. And then, so it's fun now to actually be a part of that industry and be a part of the storytelling aspect.
Absolutely, because you grow up a fan, you realize, yeah, it's a lot of work once you get actually into the industry, but if you have that passion and that drive, it's not like work.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think a lot of people have a misconception. They either one think that they're going to go wait tables, waiting for their big, in LA, waiting for their, big break. And that's the wrong way to approach it. Now, the beauty of technology has literally enabled everybody to be able to tell a story, whether it's on any one of these mediums, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, like all these different forums where you can be a content creator. And for example, me as a producer at this point, I'm always looking for somebody that can actually get things done. And so when somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to get in the industry, it's like, okay, what do you want to do, first of all? And second, like, if that's what you want to do, show me what you can do so I can get an idea on what it is you can do. Because again, essentially, you don't, somebody new, you don't know them from Adam, right? And so you're like, that's why I'm always encouraging people to do what I did, which was write your own ticket. You get some experience in the industry, you work on different levels. That's once you get your foot in the door. But at the end of the day, you still have to kind of prove what you can do. And if you can show something for it, I'm always encouraging people to write your own ticket, create something that you're passionate about, so you can actually show it, like a show reel or just a demo reel, so people can go, oh, okay, I can see what he can get something done. That's good.
Well, also much like you did starting out as a PA, because if you're a PA, you can kind of, watch what everyone's doing. You can watch the DP set up the camera and the lighting. You can watch the director rehearse with the actors. You can really kind of immerse yourself in all of it if you so choose. Is that what you did?
Oh yeah. I was so fortunate to be able to work on so many projects, being able to just exactly what you're saying from kind of close up, but not either being behind the camera or in front of the camera, but just being able to like appreciate the etiquette and the flow of everything and what people are doing and what they're accomplishing. And as a PA, I realized, okay, if I can anticipate what they need, I can become useful. In fact, when I got to work on the set of Avatar back in 2008 or whenever it was when I got to work on it, it was interesting. Nolan Murtha, he was actually he was the guy who actually brought me on. He said, my first day, he threw the script of Avatar in my lap and he said, Zach, make yourself invaluable. And I was like, okay. So I spent the most of the day like reading it. And then I came in and I was like, okay, make myself invaluable. And so I took that as understand what everybody is doing in this super complicated process, much more complicated than the average movie. And so I really tried to just digest what everybody was doing so I can anticipate and become helpful to everybody. And so then I was able to ultimately be an asset. And so I even tell people that if you haven't done anything and you just want to make your break, and I've actually told on many occasions, I've said, give a month of your time for free to any one of these people. So then they don't have to be worried about, well, can you do anything? How much am I going to be paying out? But if you're just assisting them and then you accomplish tasks that they give you, then they go, oh, this is good. They don't have to be worried about, am I making my money's worth on this person? And I've helped a bunch of people get through that they got to the point where they did show that they were valuable. And then after a month, they were able to actually get opportunities and intern and things like that.
And you never really know where opportunity is going to come. That's why you have to put yourself out there. No matter what role might seem minuscule at the time, you just never know unless you actually do it where you might end up years later.
Oh, and I actually just wrote an article the other day that got published in a online forum or magazine, and I was talking about how, well, the question they posed was, what are some of the most important things you think are important in the industry? And I said, honestly, treat everyone with respect, appreciate everybody, treat everyone with dignity. It doesn't matter who you are, like if you're the highest paid actor or the lowest paid PA or extra. Treat everyone with respect, because one, everyone has an intrinsic value, and besides that, you don't know who you're going to end up possibly working for in the future if you stay in the industry. I've seen people go throughout the ranks, and it's been fun because you kind of switch positions and roles. And so I'm always encouraging everybody to be respectful and just to everybody, but work really, really hard.
It reminds me of this, I won't call it a meme. It was more like one of those inspirational posts you see on Instagram. It was a picture of Bradley Cooper shaking hands with Benedict Cumberbatch, and it said, "You're never too important to be nice to people." And that's really what it is, because if you're a jerk, no one wants to work with you, because the film industry, it may seem huge, but word travels fast, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, it is very small. And at the end of the day, you want to work with people you want to work with. And I saw one time on a project, this PA yelling at the caterers. And I was like, man, first of all, who are you to yell at a caterer? Second of all, why? I mean, it doesn't work being a bully like in the high school thing where you perceived, like you're more important by being rude, but it doesn't get you. I mean, we're in 2021. It doesn't pay to be rude. I don't think it ever really did. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, especially now because also you never know, not saying anybody would be, but you never know who might have their phone out and they see, someone being rude to another. They can always hit the record button. And
yeah.
once it's out there, it's out there.
Exactly. If we could all be like Keanu Reeves, just kind to everyone, this world would be a better place.
That man is a national treasure.
Amen to that. He's one of the people I want to work with, or at least meet someday. He's a gem.
Yeah, as all the stories I've heard about him, I would love to just meet him for 5 minutes and just chat with him. I have no doubt that the stories are true, but I'd love to experience it for myself because I'm like, there's no way anyone on this planet could be that nice. But I believe the stories.
No, it is, especially, in fact, I was able to give a lecture recently, and I was talking to about how, again, being kind to everyone and some of the most, and not to try to avoid difficulties in life, because again, that's part of life. And that's the beauty of the struggle of drama and movies that we watch. We love to see people overcome, right? The underdog. We love to see people improve. But I was talking about how some of the most interesting people I've ever heard of or had the pleasure to meet have literally had some of the most difficult situations in their life. And Keanu, as an example, he's had some rough life experiences. And I think that has helped shape him to become a more kind, generous person. And so if you've ever been hurt, don't reciprocate that hurt. Be kind, like turn around and spread positivity.
Well, and I've used this phrase ad nauseum on previous podcasts I've done and just in life in general. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. I heard that saying, I can't remember exactly where, but it's been almost a decade. And I've lived by that, or at least I try to, ever since, because no matter what minuscule thing might happen to you, if you make it out to be a bigger deal than it might be or worse than it is, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, we're all flawed humans. We just got to give up our best, give people some flexibility and be patient with them. And then, of course, hopefully people can be patient with us as well. But that'll just make a better world.
No, absolutely. But to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned working on Avatar. How was your experience working on that film? And did anyone have any idea that it would be as big as it became? Because for those who may not know, it's currently the highest grossing movie ever made.
Correct.
So how was your, I know it was in a fight with Avengers Endgame for a bit, but since then it's retaken the lead, but how was your experience working on that film?
Oh, honestly, let's see if I can keep it short. I learned so much. First of all, it was such an incredible opportunity to work with one of my favorite directors. And in fact, it was fun because I got to work with my brother Tyler on it as well. So we got to work on what we call a sexy project, something that we can be proud of, the kind of movies that you're like, we used to watch and love going to see in the theaters. And then, of course, we got to be a part of one. And so working with my brother, working with the director, I wrote a little bit about that as well. But some of the other things that I found that were so incredible is there were a lot of incredibly talented people on there. And it was one of the few movies that I felt like everybody was a real family. Everybody worked really, really, really hard and treated each other really well. In fact, sometimes people talk like Jim Cameron has he's quite intense. He can be intense. In fact, I remember one time, so he and I was out with the virtual camera and marking his spots with these little black T-shaped sandbags. And we were out on this gray volume stage, if you see in the images, where Jim's going around and it's just he and I, and I'm like holding the cable, make sure you kind of run around and not trip on it. And one time he was like, well, typically a director will be like, okay, here's the starting and stopping point and whatnot. And I got to the point where he was so used to kind of just repicking his shots just by stepping that he would test out a couple and then he would quit. He forgot to communicate to me. And I started to learn I just had to learn how to read his kind of facial expressions to see which one of the starting and stopping points he liked. And on more than one occasion, he'd be like, no, Zach, I want it here. And he'd, and slide it with his foot or whatever. And of course, I'm not going to, be like, well, you never told me. Like, it's just roll with it. Right. And just understand that he is actually a genius. The guy works so fast that he gets impatient with people, or used to get more impatient with people that weren't keeping up with him. And I can appreciate that, and I can respect that. But anyway, I would also recommend people, if they want to kind of get a flavor of him now, watch the masterclass that Jim does on storytelling. It's really incredible. But for me, working with him back then, it was just one of those moments where, nobody really thought, to answer your other part of the question, nobody really thought that it was going to be the top grossing movie. Now, I worked at 20th Century Fox in Century City back in 2003. And that was just a couple years after Titanic had been the all-time grossing movie of all time. And it was interesting because apparently Fox had actually, even having that experience with Jim Cameron, they still turned down the first time when I guess Victoria Rossellini, or I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but anyway, they passed on Avatar the first time at Fox. And then, of course, Dune Entertainment came in and they ended up doing it, which was great. And of course, it was ahead of its time. Jim gives a lot of credit for watching what they did on Lord of the Rings with Gollum, to know that the technology had finally caught up to what his vision was to accomplish that. But when I first read the script, I was like, okay, this is cool. It's a good story because he knows how to make good character arcs and just, a good solid story. That's one of his gifts. And I thought, but this feels like Pocahontas or like Fern Gully, the old animation I used to watch. So I didn't think it was like too much of an original story, but the way he comes in and can just beef up the different aspects to make it next level, I think that's part of his genius as well. And so, of course, the timing was incredible. I mean, he's literally created some of the best movies of all time. And he's super, he's just great at what he does. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was quite an experience and quite fun. But then, of course, when we started seeing the visuals come back from Weta Digital and, at Weta down in New Zealand, the previs stuff, for example, that my brother would actually do the initial kind of layout and create the environment so Jim could kind of pick the angles. Then Weta would layer all the details on, and the grass and all the glowing elements and the, sweat and water, all the kind of fun stuff, all the details. As soon as we'd start seeing those dailies come back, we're like, this is actually spectacular. And then we'd put them in wheels where we'd make sure the interocular and convergence was just perfect. So that, for the human eye, rather than like making it too far away, because those are the kind of 3D movies that would get you kind of nauseous if it's not aligned with how your eyes would actually see that. So we'd clean those up in wheels until every shot was literally perfect. And that's one of the reasons why it took so long for Jim, because he's a perfectionist in a lot of ways. He just does it right, and so that's kind of actually one of the ways that I felt I needed to be kind of a perfectionist in some of my projects. But then there's a balance. There's kind of two sides to that. I mean, we don't have to necessarily get into it, but it was incredible to watch him work, and it gave me a lot of inspiration. And then I kind of went down the path of a few things. In fact, Finite Water was one of my documentaries that I did after that Jim kind of inspired me to do. It was about water conservation, and that went on to win like 30 some odd awards, which was quite fun. But the interesting thing is, I didn't try to perfect that one. I just tried to create something and just get it done, because I had a successful person tell me one time, perfection is the enemy to done. And sometimes getting something done is better than making it perfect. But then on the flip side, if you have the luxury of time and money that Jim did, and if you're doing it at your own accord, but then again, my older brother tells me, he's like, art is never done. And he's like, it's just the director tells you to stop working on it at a certain point. So anyway, there's kind of a conundrum there.
No, I love hearing all that. And I can imagine, when you think of directors in the industry, not too many more that you could think of higher than James Cameron that you'd want to work with, because you mentioned Terminator, True Lies, Titanic, Alien. Some of the most some of the most iconic movies that have ever been made, he directed, and his strive to be perfect is why those movies are so good and why they still stand the test of time. I call the original Terminator probably the most successful independent movie ever made, because it was a B-level movie at the time. And then you look at Terminator 2, which to me that film should be taught in all film classes, from sound editing to script, acting, all of it. Like I say it's probably a perfect movie. And you know, I remember when yeah, and when Avatar came out, and I love that you mentioned Fern Gully, because that's what I thought of too, with the setting and the way the characters kind of looked. It made me think of Fern Gully, and I hadn't seen that movie in many years up until that point. But it really was an event when that movie came out, because it had so much hype, and the story did remind me of a little bit of Pocahontas, a little bit of Fern Gully, but I think it was different enough that I wouldn't call it like a carbon copy. And the visuals still to me are probably the best visuals I've ever seen in any movie to this day.
Yeah.
It was incredible what was pulled off. So that's awesome that you got to be a part of it, and you got to learn so much under someone like a James Cameron, and just watching him work.
I got so much FaceTime with him that it was, and I could put up with him kind of barking at me when I wasn't like fast enough, but I was still actually really fast. It's one of the things I've had years of experience and just trying to read and whatnot, the situation. But again, I'm beyond grateful for having that experience. But one of the things you mentioned that I want to kind of share a little bit on is, you mentioned some stuff about like Jim, and like the way it was a great example of something where he took it to the next level. Because, Bob Z or Robert Zemeckis, he had certain movies that he was able to use similar technology. And of course, Jim took existing technology, and we're always building on the giants of the shoulders or whatever the previous people, right? And I think that's really encouraging. And once you actually learn the storytelling ability and you get a camera in your hand and you know how to make complete a movie, then you can actually start adding and tweaking. In fact, Jim even talks about that in his masterclass again. It's fun because he just does such a great job of conveying good storytelling and ways to kind of improve your skills. And then once you do that, never, I guess the thing is, don't think that somebody else has done it. There's always new things to do. There's new ways to approach things. I mean, nobody thought that Jim was going to take that technology and make it so hyper realistic, because of the actual movements where you felt like you were there, rather than kind of steady, kind of robotic, too perfect of shots, that our human eye kind of senses. Feels very robotic. But with Jim, like when he's whipping around in the jungle, like that's him first person in that virtual world, recording it anew. And anyway, it's awesome because there are more ways there as technology continues to advance. There's always some kind of new spin and new way to add to it. So trust yourself and take those opportunities and try new things.
Absolutely. I can't wait to take that masterclass too. I've done the Aaron Sorkin one and a little bit of the Ron Howard one, but the James Cameron one I can't wait to get to. And it's a little pricey, but I know masterclass has a deal where you can basically partner with someone to kind of split the cost of it. But it's absolutely worth it if you want to work in film. I can't recommend masterclass enough.
Oh, in fact, I think people need to realize that just because, people pay a ton of money for film school. If you're not willing to continue to invest in yourself, and a couple $100 a year, whether it be, an Audible account or some sort of where you're constantly educating yourself on the industry or the things that interest you to become better and, understand and appreciate things even more. I mean, it's like people should be, if you're not willing to invest in your own education continually, then maybe you should rethink this industry. But
for sure. I did want to circle back to a little bit earlier in your career as we start to wrap things up. You mentioned working on Dumb and Dumber and Independence Day as a PA. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned from those specific projects?
That's a great question. That was when I was like in middle school or high school, so long ago. But I remember being kind of, because like, for example, out on the Salt Flats in Salt Lake, they used to have that's where Area 51 was supposed to be. Or in fact, we were actually filming in downtown Provo, like University Avenue, and up in like Park City for like some of it doubled as like Aspen, Colorado. In fact, at the time when Salt Lake International Airport looked completely different. That's how it was supposed to be the same airport. But it was interesting because then when I got to view, I remember being there on certain days and certain shoots, and then a while later when the movie came out and I seen it on screen, I was like, man, that's movie magic, because it's different. It's just different than what you're kind of experiencing, and that's where it comes down to like the director or the person with the eye. What are they seeing through the lens? What are they telling us? What are they showing us that is important to look at? Because everybody's going to have a kind of a different interpretation. But Jim Carrey, he seemed really nice. I didn't really get to interact with him too much, but then there were, of course, just a ton of people. A lot of the stuff was really separated back in the day, back then. Different, multiple splintered different groups. Things have much more streamlined since then in a lot of ways. But I don't know. I learned a lot. I learned that I had really enjoyed the process and all the excitement. It's long and hard and grueling a lot of days, but if you enjoy storytelling, if you enjoy being a part of that magic of storytelling and the movie making process, then it's something obviously you have to be in. If it's not as glamorous as you think or as you hoped it would be, then maybe find something more glamorous. But because it is very difficult work, very hard work.
For sure, but there's no bigger reward, I think, than when you conceive a project from start to finish and you see it completed.
Oh yeah. In fact, what's really fun, the other thing that Jim kind of inspired me to do was I started out a franchise that we've been working on for quite some time with Weta Workshops down in New Zealand. And we've spent tons of money developing out this world, which is really exciting. I'm excited to talk more about that some other time. But in fact, even more recently, for the past couple of years, we've been working on this other franchise called the Supernatural University. And we have all these, we were talking about earlier about the Ninja Turtles, for example, and the Ninja Turtles, like those puppeteering and the animatronics, all that kind of stuff feels more kind of gritty and real than too much CGI. Again, I love good CGI. I'm just saying that there's something, those practical effects, the stuff that inspired me when I was a kid watching The Labyrinth and The Neverending Story and, Willow and all these different things. Those to me were fun. And now we have a story, one of the movie that we're going to be filming, it's called Lycan. And we're actually going to be doing an animatronic, actual werewolf type creature. And it's just absolutely fun to be able to be a part of that, to actually be creating our own stuff at this point. So anyway, that's something you can kind of keep a lookout for as we move forward as the super. In fact, it's actually a real university that we've created where you can learn about cryptids and paranormal and aliens and all sorts of, claims around the world, and streamlined in this kind of clearinghouse of the Supernatural University, where you can actually get like a PhD, a paranormal expert honorary degree. And anyway, it's a lot of fun, but that is like our Hogwarts that's in all of our different movies as well. So each one of our movies references back to this real life Supernatural University we've created.
I love that. Well, I definitely have to have you back on to talk more about it.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, growing up loving movies like Ninja Turtles. You specifically mentioned Batman '89. So I've got to ask, because I know we're both fans, are you excited to see Michael Keaton back in the Flash movie next year?
I'm just so excited that my generation that grew up watching all this stuff are now the ones making the decisions, knowing how much it's going to mean to see, like, see that stuff. The multiverse, the way they're able to bring all this stuff back is just absolutely genius, because they're giving the audience and us geeks and nerds exactly what we want. And I commend them, because they're doing the best job at learning, tying all the stuff together. And anyway, so yeah, I'm going to just keep handing them bags of money. Just take the money, because I love it. I love when they do that.
For sure. And, when they released that kind of teaser trailer a couple of months ago, and you hear Michael Keaton's voice and you just see the silhouette at the end of the trailer of him as Batman, I'm just like, I'll be there opening day. You've got my money. I don't need to see anymore. It's like with Spider-Man. I mean, the Spider-Man movie will already be out once this interview airs, but it's like that. I've seen enough where, like, I don't need to watch any more commercials. I don't need to see any more trailers. You've got my money. I'm just ready to see it.
Oh yeah. In fact, it's fun because my brother Tyler, he actually worked on the original Spider-Man movie trilogy.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
and so it's fun. It was fun to actually go meet Sam Raimi. In fact, he invited me on set, and Sam Raimi was like the nicest guy in the world. And so to be able to see Sam Raimi's vision of Doc Ock and Sandman and Green Goblin, to be able to bring that full circle, tie it in, 20 years later, is again so masterfully done. And I respect the greats. And I just anyway, those guys are incredible.
Yeah, no, I have very fond memories of that original Spider-Man trilogy because it was like right at the end of my high school tenure. So I have very vivid memories of going to the theater, opening day for all three of them
Oh,
to watch them. So
oh yeah, I can't even. In fact, we used to call this the little theater in our town, in our hometown, Sticky Floor Cinemas. But just the experience of sometimes kind of walking down the aisle with all the drinks spilled and stuff, never cleaning up. But it's like it was fine because like I had such incredible experiences. In fact, I watched Ninja Turtles there and the Batman there, and like nothing was like more impactful than maybe Labyrinth, around the same time. But those had such an impact on me that I was like, I have to be a part of this. And if that happens to you as well, then you probably should pursue it because it is fun. It is, it's a hard, grueling work, but it's so worth it. It's like you said, it's so satisfying once you're able to create something.
absolutely. Do you have any website or social media that you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
Oh, sure. Well, let's see. I think the biggest thing is the Supernatural University right now. Let's see. I should have one of those LinkedIn linked trees where it kind of shows where we have the franchise of End of an Empire and the franchise of the Supernatural University, but through IMDb and if you actually just, in fact, I don't know even that's a really good question. I don't have this website set up for it yet, but if you're interested, yeah.
And finally, I like to end the interview with this. What is one thing you have watched recently? It could be a movie or a series that you would recommend to everyone.
Oh man, I'm sure everybody's seen Breaking Bad by now. Just with seeing incredible like storytelling. Recently, my goodness, I was really surprised. So my Tyler actually worked on a lot of these animations like Kung Fu Panda and stuff. So we really got in, and my kids love watching those as well. But I was really, really shocked at how fun Croods 2 was. It was actually so much more fun, like, than it should have been. So satisfying to watch with kids. So,
Yeah, now, some of those animated movies can be very surprising. If even if they're not made for someone say my age, like nieces or nephews might love them, and you watch them, and you're like, oh, it's actually pretty good. So
yeah.
I'll have to keep that in mind. I love that you mentioned Breaking Bad because Giancarlo Esposito is actually going to be at a convention in my hometown in February. I can't wait to meet him. He was so good. He's good in everything he does, but in that show especially,
Oh, yeah.
just
Oh,
knocked it out of the park.
yeah. I love it. There is nothing more fun than good, talented artists and actors and actresses you just like honing their craft and entertaining us, just drawing us out into a world and just making it believable. I think there's nothing more fun to be able to have that escape in movies. So
Absolutely. Well, Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show. We'll definitely have to have you back on sometime.
oh, absolutely. Thanks so much for letting me take the time. You have a great one.